So thank you to our speakers. We shall begin our first plenary. So at this point, I'll ask the speakers for the first plenary to come up. We have Mr. Mahabir, founder of the Nepal Wireless Networking Project. We have Professor Kanchanasut of IntERLab, Asian Institute of Technology, Mr. John Jack, Deputy Chief Information Officer of the Government of Vanuatu, and Mr. John Garrity, Advisor of Connectivity Capital. Our first plenary, the topic is Setting the Scene, Innovating to Connect the Unconnected. So community-led solutions have been adopted in a number of places through innovative technology that enable alternative ways of connecting to the internet. This session will feature discussions on community networks, technology, models, content, services, and best practices in the Asia-Pacific region. So let us welcome our speakers, and our moderator for this plenary is Mr. Duncan Macintosh, Executive Director of APNIC Foundation. Let's all give them a warm welcome.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. As just mentioned, my name is Duncan Macintosh. I'm the Executive Director of the APNIC Foundation. My apologies for those of you who are here at the end of yesterday that you have to see me again at the start of the next day. I won't put you through yet another introduction to the APNIC Foundation. I think you, or hopefully you will know it by the end of this week. I would, however, highlight one aspect of the foundation, and that's its mission statement, and its focus on increasing investment. And I really can't think of a better example of an area that we should all think about increasing investment in than the subject that we have to discuss today. And so I'm very pleased, and I want to thank the Internet Society and thank ESCAP for this opportunity to moderate this panel today. I think it'll be a very interesting discussion. I want to suggest, although it might be a little hard to imagine, that you should think of this as more of a fireside chat. Minus the fireplace, obviously, and we really want to engage with you. While we're all sitting up here and talking to you, we really want to have a discussion. So we'll have we'll invite each of the panelists to talk a little bit about their experiences and their expertise, but then we're going to throw it open fairly quickly to questions and discussions from the audience. So everyone, please get ready. We really want to make this as interactive as possible. There's an enormous amount of knowledge and expertise out there in the audience, and we don't want that sitting there quietly and not taking advantage of it. While our panel has already been introduced, and so I won't introduce them again, I do want to highlight one particular aspect, and that is we have two very distinguished members on our panel. Not only do we have two members of the Internet Hall of Fame in Mahabir and Professor Kanchana, but they are also both winners of the John B. Postal Award. For those of you who know the John B. Postal Award, it's Internet Society's most preeminent award, so I do want to recognise the knowledge and expertise we have up, and not in any way to compare it to the knowledge and expertise with John Garrity and John Jack, who I try not to confuse between the two Johns. So with that, I'd like to perhaps invite Dr. Kanchana to begin by telling us a little bit about her experience, because obviously you've set up a community network here in Thailand. I think we're particularly interested in your technical process and the process and thinking about why it came about and how you did it. Thank you, Dr. Kanchana.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and I really thank the ISOC and UN ESCAP for giving us this opportunity to meet, and hopefully we can exchange a lot of information. It's an honor that Duncan has given me opportunity to be the first speaker, so I can take more time. All right, I actually landed into this community network accidentally, because I was simply a professor in computer science, and we work, on mobile ad hoc network as part of our research. We did a lot of simulations, and we never had real experience on using the network until 2006. I decided to run an experiment on using this mobile ad hoc network as for post-disaster scenario, and we did a very successful demonstration in 2006 in Phuket. However, when we had a big flood in 2011, I tried to introduce the technology to the people working at the disaster center, and no one was prepared to listen. So I thought, if this is the case, we have to introduce the technology to the local people, to common people, so that people will become acquainted to the technology. So how to do that? Because we didn't have big ISP or anything to work on. So we started by using a camp, a student camp, to set up community network. So since then, it became our part of our interest, and the network became our living laboratory. We used, for those who are interested in the technology, we use very small, router that we put our own firmware inside the router. It's based on the mobile ad hoc network protocol called OLSR, and our first network is called Dumbo. So I think that's enough for my introduction. Thank you.
I think we'll come back with some more questions, but I'd like to invite Mahabir now to introduce his network and tell us a little bit about his story and the technologies he used, particularly the TV white space.
Thank you. I think I am the oldest guy in this, program who got involved in the community network, because I started it from 2001. And I have been working since for building community networks and trying to bring the services, for the communities as much as it is possible. So based on my experience, or what I say is to build community networks and make it successful, the first thing is we need to, find ways to overcome the regulatory hurdles. Because when in 2001 I started building the community network, we didn't even have Wi-Fi legalized or de-licensed in 2001. So in 2006, Nepal government legalized or de-licensed Wi-Fi band. And then second hurdles is the permission from the regulatory body to build a community network and bring services. So that is also a problem I had to face. So for that, we had to fight with the government to legalize the community networks, or what we call rural ISP license. Because to build community network and bring internet services in the rural areas, we had to have a permission from the governments, and there was no, provision to provide license to build small networks. There were big commercial operators, but it was not that. Then TV wide space also. So I. In 2015 and 16, 17, the time I, tried to, test the TV wide space technology in the rural areas, and it was also difficult to get this, overcome this regulatory hurdle. So my experience is first, we have to fight to overcome these regulatory hurdles to build community networks. Then the strategies, how to make strategies and and programs to overcome those hurdles. So the first thing to build a community network, my experience is the community has to be, has to take the initiative by themselves. There's nobody going to come from outside and help the communities build community networks. The community has to take the initiative by themselves. Then the government should also take initiative. Because without the support from the government, no matter how hard communities work to bring the community networks and build community networks and bring the services in the rural areas or the last mile connectivity, there is going to be problems. But I don't know whether such kind of it depends on countries. Some countries have taken a very good initiative to bring the internet in the rural areas, but some countries the government has not taken. So in our case, government was very passive for many years, but in the last few years, the government of Nepal has also taken some initiatives to bring the internet in the last mile connectivity using the universal service obligation fund. Because fund is there in every country, fund is there to bring this connectivity in the last mile area. But it's simply they are not using that fund for the right purpose. So third thing is the big commercial operators. Usually what happens is the big commercial operators, they work in the area where they have the density of the population is big, where there is a chance to make money. Usually they don't go to in the rural areas where there is a sparse population. So the big commercial operators also should help as part of their CSR to help build community network and bring the services. And then of course, if we build community networks, it will help to create entrepreneurships and entrepreneurs. Not big on a big scale, but small scales. There can be people who can, have their own, who can create their own business, who can be entrepreneur, who can come up with entrepreneur mindset to bring services for the local people. Of course, there are challenges, and the difficulties to do that. My experience, the biggest challenge is the bandwidth constraint. In the rural areas, when we bring internet using Wi-Fi or wireless networks, because it is difficult to build optical fiber networks, there will be bandwidth constraint. People have started using YouTube. If they use YouTube or things like that, then there is always shortage of the bandwidth constraint, and so we have to find ways to resolve that issues also. Also, maintenance and operation. In the rural areas, there are not many people who have this technical knowledge, know how to maintain and operate this network. So it is difficult to find. For that, we have to find ways to solve that issues by providing training to the local people. We cannot bring engineers from outside to solve this local network problem. So power problem is another issue in the rural areas, of mostly in the developing countries or poor countries. There is power shortage. So to do that, we have to use solar and wind or whatever, micro hydro, whatever power is available for that. And also, it is difficult to find the operators in the rural areas because running community network in the rural areas is not financially, big. It's not going to make much money. So it's difficult to find commercial operators in the rural areas to build community networks. So lastly, what I would like to request all of you who are participating in this meeting from different countries is to build community network and make it operate in a successful, sustainable. We need to do some innovation and research as well. So based on my experience for working in the rural areas for around 20 years, so what I have realized is it's necessary to have a center where we can discuss together and find the solution. So we have established a National Innovation Center in Nepal. So through that center, we are trying to solve these problems, whether it's for the community network or it's for other farmers' problem or any other problems in the communities. So what I would like to request you is, if you have problems, if you are facing problems, building community networks or bringing services or developing applications, so please let us know. We can work also together and try to find the solution, because there should be there is a solution for some problems, for any problems. So through this community, innovation center that we have started in Nepal, I am ready to work with anybody around the world and together and find the solution for a specific community, because the problems are different in different areas. It should not be only in the field of ICT, but in any field. So that's something I would like to invite you and request you to let me know if you need any help to work together. We can work together and solve the problem, whether it's the community problem or whether it is any other problem facing by the communities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mahabir. You've really raised some interesting points there, which I think this morning we can get some time to really unpack and dig into that. You raised one particular point around sustainability for community networks. And Professor Kanchana, just before we move on to the other speakers, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a bit more about how you think about the long-term sustainability of what you're doing. How do you fund it, support it? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. I resume our introduction. Since we started with a student camp, definitely the network could not sustain. What happened is that we had a series of camps. During those few years, we learned a lot from the community. Okay, our approach and Mahabir approach is quite different. We're kind of moving into the community from the university. Okay, and for his approach, he drive the activity from the community. Okay, so it's quite different. We were like foreigners moving into different rural areas. So we learned a lot from that, and we found that in order to be sustainable, we have to get the community to take responsibility of the expenses. So we started to introduce we collect small fee in order to operate the network. We use the same thing, we use CSR for the initial investment, buying equipment, which is not expensive, and this is the model we are using. Okay, we contacted big companies for sponsorship to buy equipment, and then we asked students to set up a camp, use the free labor from students, and set up the network, and the villagers pay for the remaining, for the operation and maintenance. During this period, we also developed local technician to take care of the operation, and soon after we set up kind of we call village or community ISP. And gradually we are getting the villagers to be part of our ISP operation. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Kanchana. Maybe at this point I can invite John Jack from Vanuatu into the conversation to tell us a little bit about what's happening in Vanuatu and what are the challenges there for the development of community networks.
Thank you, Duncan. Also take this opportunity to thank ISOC for giving me the opportunity to be part of the discussion, and UNESCAP, also the APIS Secretariat for allowing Vanuatu to participate in the APIS meeting in the last few days. Well, let me start by saying that our two panelists here who are very experienced in community networks have said quite a lot about community networks. In Vanuatu, we haven't actually started a specific community network. However, the projects that were introduced to us, it brings up this thing about, getting the community to be involved, to be engaged in the project at the very beginning. That creates the demand where the community see where they can come in to play their roles and responsibilities in making sure that the projects get sustained into the long term. So we have quite a few number of projects, but one specifically which I want to mention today is a project called the telemedicine, which I was heavily involved in back in 2014 and 15 and up 2016, 17. So it started as a telemedicine project where we want to connect a health center in a community to the internet so that the health worker can communicate with the doctors in the urban centers and even to other parts of the world. But as the community sees the benefit of, now that the health worker has access to information and has access to resources where they can help to save lives, the community, they just come in forward to help to extend the project. And I agree with what the other speakers just mentioned about getting the communities to back the projects. So for this project, the community then take ownership of the project and started to raise funds to extend the network to schools and to other community centers within that island. It's very challenging at times, and funding is not easy. Also getting experts to assist in making sure that they have the proper network where services could be served and people start having access to the services. So the community, they dedicate themselves to fund training for a expert within the community. It ended up that once the trainee got returned from the training, he started to charge the community again, even though the community has invested a lot already to get him to the training and to acquire skills and knowledge in order to sustain and look after the network. So that's one of the challenges, as we don't have enough experts in our communities in the very remote areas. The other panelists have mentioned about getting the commercial operators to service some of these areas. For us in the islands, it's a very big challenge in terms of getting deploying the infrastructures into some of these very remote areas where you will have a population of less than 1,000 people in a community, or even less than 500. So it's very challenging for us. But as a government, we want to make sure that the service of mobile or data or internet reach out to everyone, and nobody should be left behind, according to our SDGs. So supporting these operators to making sure that they deliver the service to these very remote villages, to these very people that are in this village, it's not easy, and it's a big task that the government is continuing to negotiate and continue to come into some sort of arrangements with these operators. So we created what we call the Universal Access Program for the government, yet it fails, even though we have an ambitious target of 98% coverage, where we want to connect as many of these people. So, and one of the other challenges that we have, again, is the language barrier. For us in Vanuatu alone, I'm not sure about other Pacific Island countries, but for Vanuatu alone, we have more than 120 languages. That's a very big challenge. One village to another village, they talk two different languages. So it's not easy to negotiate and getting the community to agree into extending into having networks as such. And also our culture, where we have the chiefs who have the last say in the decision-making process. That is also a big challenge for having community networks where for anything that happen in a community, in a village level, the chiefs have to make the last and the final decision. So I think those are some of the challenges that we faced, but we look forward to working with partners, and especially funding is not easy for us. Of course, the other challenge which the many natural disasters that are affecting us in the island nations, that is also something that we need to be mindful of when we are designing community networks, making sure that those networks they can be they can be able to stand the natural events that are happening, natural disasters that are happening within our region. Thank you, Duncan.
Thanks very much, John. And it seems like a good opportunity to bring in the other John, because all of you have mentioned the challenges of sustainability and the need for continuing investment. So for Connectivity Capital, maybe just set the scene on who you are for those who haven't met you this week, but then sort of respond to the comments that you've heard so far, John.
Yep, absolutely. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to participate on this session. It has been a marathon week, so it's great that we are ending the week on such an interesting topic. As Duncan mentioned, I'm here representing Connectivity Capital, which is a private investment firm that supports ISPs in frontier markets. But really, my perspective, I think, has been shaped by the various roles that I've had in my career. So I've been in a range of different roles spanning the private sector and the public sector. I was at Cisco for 10 years out of Silicon Valley. I also worked in the U.S. government in the Agency for International Development. And while I'm living here in the region, I'm also consulting with UNDP and the ITU on a few different projects. So really, the perspective that I have on community networks from these various different roles is one of where community networks can actually have outsized impact. And what I mean by outsized impact is that both at a small level, it's possible, and we have seen community networks to be sustainable and provide support and services to small communities, but also outsized impact in terms of scale. So we have seen some community networks really grow and have subscriber bases in the tens, hundreds of thousands, and I think our friends who have been tracking all of the community networks around the world can even share with you at least one example that I know of where you have community networks that have a subscriber base in the millions. So what are some examples of these entities that have had this sort of impact? Well, when you think about on the sort of smaller scale, but still sustainable and being able to provide services to communities, one of the entities that I've engaged with when I was at USAID is a small community cellular network in the Philippines on the East Coast in Aurora Province. And so these are communities of small fishing hamlets, small fishing villages that on one side are bounded by large mountainous regions and then on the other side by the sea. And so they're very isolated. They're in geographic areas where the telcos do not want to go, and they also are of such small population density and low per capita income that there's no economic incentive for most providers to go to. But with support from the University of the Philippines coming in, these communities were able to self-organize and essentially establish their own community cellular networks that are now self-sustaining and continue to provide 2G and SMS service. From the USAID side, our support actually was not for CapEx or OpEx. It was really on the social science work to take a look at what are the impacts when 2G and SMS are brought to these communities. So that's impact that's sustainable and at a small scale. Now, with the work that I'm doing at Connectivity Capital, in our portfolio, if you were here on Monday, I shared some of the ISPs that are in our portfolio, but at least two of them that our founders have provided funding to were community networks before they rolled into becoming private for-profit entities. And so these are AirJaldi in northern India, which was a community network when it started, but because of its growth and the services that it was able to provide, then rolled into a for-profit entity, and now AirJaldi has a subscriber base of over 230,000 people or so. Similarly, Habari Node in Tanzania also started as a community network, and it grew to such an extent where they realized to be able to continue to provide service to all of the subscribers that wanted to participate, they needed to formalize as well. And so then they rolled into becoming a private or a for-profit entity, and the community network became one of the founding partners on that. So from my perspective, both in terms of even small community networks as well as large community networks that then have the ability to scale, there is really a role for CNs to play in the continuum of different modalities to provide service to communities that are unserved or underserved. The difficult thing is, of course, identifying and establishing the right policy and regulatory frameworks that allow community networks to flourish. And I hope to hear more about that in the sessions to follow. So let me stop there.
Thanks very much, John. Obviously, investment plays an important role, but I wanted to go back to the rest of the panel about another aspect that has an impact, and that is changing technology. So to ask Mahabir and Professor Kanchana and John Jack, how do you think about the impact of new technologies on what you're doing? I mean, satellites, one obvious example, but do you plan, how do you plan for that?
Okay, let me do that. So when I started the wireless network in 2002, I used an indoor router that has the 60 milliwatt transmit power to build a long-range wireless network. So using that indoor router, we built long-range network up to linking a village that was like 40 kilometers far. So that was the beginning, because the technology was just developing. So what we have now is the technology has been developing so fast, and it's changing the power of even the Wi-Fi routers and Wi-Fi access points, all these point-to-point device, point-to-multipoint device. They are changing very fast. So we have to, adapt. We have to, use these new technologies that is coming, because these new technologies, they have, they are more powerful than the previous ones. For example, I use at the beginning, I use these devices that had 7 Mbps throughput power, or 2 Mbps throughput power. But now, I mean, those 7 Mbps or 4 Mbps, 2 Mbps through the device with that, throughput is not going to, do much. So it is changing now, where you have been using devices that has 100 Mbps throughput power, or more than 100, 200 Mbps, 50 Mbps. So, and because the bandwidth, the people have been starting using more and more types of applications, and that is available in the internet, and so we have to change that. And for building the community network, another problem we face is the mostly in the remote mountainous areas, we have the problem of the line of sight also. That creates difficulties for building the wireless network. So that's why we tested this TV wide space technology. This is emerging technology. It has not been developed quite well, but we have found that those technologies can be more useful. But the main problem is the regulatory issues. If the government bring regulations for allowing these people networks to use this TV wide space. So we have to change. We have to change ourselves, and we have to use the new technology that is coming, because we are not going to develop this technology by ourselves. That's my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahabir. Professor Kanchana, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. I have. We are in a different, very different environment, because in Thailand we have, well, as the Ministry of Digital Economy mentioned, that we have Pracharat, Net Pracharat project, and which kind of extend the fiber optic network to all the villages. So we have different scenario. And from my experience, since I can't remember, I think it's around 1996, 1997, I worked on a satellite network for education with a wide project in Japan. And it took me 1.5 years to get a license to operate the receiving station. So when I got involved in this kind of activity, I decided not to waste my time dealing with licensing. So we try to adopt whatever legal, whatever we are allowed to use, for example, Wi-Fi, and we try to extend that as much as possible. And we work around the technical constraint using our technical approach. We try to be smarter to extend the network using a very limited bandwidth or limited license. We also tried TV white space. We were lucky to have a research grant from the regulator because we are a university. So from our experience, we also found that the technology is still in the emerging stage and not quite ready to be kind of turn on technology for community network solution. It's not easy to operate, and it's not yet ready. I'm sure that a lot of work still to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And John Jack, I think a lot of people might assume satellites will solve all your problems in Vanuatu. Please, Dr. Kanchana.
Satellite. With the satellite, I think, many years ago, we didn't have any problem, and we worked on a satellite protocol that make things better for massive distribution of content. And I think if we have satellite network that is affordable, we'll be happy to switch to satellite. Yeah.
John Jack, what are your thoughts? Will satellites solve all your problems, or?
Thank you, Duncan. That will be very good. But with our experience, what we are using, the kind of technology we're using, we depend very much on satellite to reach out to the last miles that we are talking about here. As I mentioned earlier, the commercial operators will only reach to places where they can make they can see the return on the investments. So it's very challenging, and especially now that they're talking about different solutions in terms of the technologies with satellite with the satellite. We still depend very much on satellite. There's different all the bands that we have access to. We have this project with ITU to have a C-band installed in several sites within Vanuatu. In one of the discussions that we had this morning, in one of the Pacific Island countries, even though the infrastructure is already set up, there's still not enough resources to sustain that installation that has been set up quite a few number of years ago. So now we're talking about another band. We are talking now about KU, and very soon KA will be available. But we have this infrastructure set up to be used. But since that we don't have the resources to sustain this, there's a new technology that's coming in. How can we get this to work together? Those are the kind of technologies that we will need for places like small island nations where it's really difficult to reach, to go in person to visit them, because one, there'll be challenges with flights to get to these places, as well as most of these places, they don't have access to good quality roads where you can travel by vehicle and reach these places on time and fix the issue and then back to the city. So satellite would be one option, but making sure that the service that is provided to us through the satellite, we are able to afford and also sustain the technology that can be used to making sure that we provide the service. Of course, Wi-Fi will be the best option. in most of these islands, most of our communities, it's just impossible to get fiber. One is you have to, these are not distances that we can just say walk across and install run fiber cables. We have to go up the mountains and down. Of course, some of the landscapes in some of our countries in this part of the world, in Bhutan or where there's mountains. But for us, there's oceans, so that's more challenging for us. So yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. And John Garrity, from an investment point of view, how do you think about changing technologies and how do you prioritize an investment decision around what technology is being used? And let me just say, after John's comments, I'm going to open it up to the audience. So please get your brains working, get your questions ready. When John finishes, we'll open it up. John.
Sure. Well, from Connectivity Capital and the review and the due diligence process and identifying opportunities, I think even though it is a sector-specific capital investment firm, it is a debt capital investment firm. And so a lot of the standard ratios that are used in assessing debt investments are applied here. There's nothing magical about it. I mean, it's basically making sure that these ISPs that we're looking at are running net positive cash flow, that they're running current ratios where their assets are larger than their liabilities. So a lot of the standard metrics apply. But what is interesting is that for a number of these entities that whether you're running off of microwave and Wi-Fi for backhaul or you're using cellular technology, I mean, a lot of the CapEx deployments have dropped precipitously over the last decade or so. So if you're running, for example, a community cellular deployment, and you're serving a small community that has a radius of 5 kilometers or so, and you only have a few thousand people, you don't need to build a carrier grade 50-meter tower that you're sourcing from Ericsson or Nokia. You can purchase and build towers that are a small percentage of the cost there, or you can be even going to open source technology, and we're seeing a lot of really interesting developments around open source hardware and software for BTS. Same thing on the Wi-Fi side. I mean, it's a very, very dynamic ecosystem where you have a number of companies that are providing very low cost backhaul and access technologies on the Wi-Fi side. And TV white space is still a bit of a nascent ecosystem, so it's not as dynamic in terms of the pricing for hardware as some of these other technologies, but that's one of the things that we're hoping for, that it's a bit of a chicken and an egg. I mean, you need the regulatory policy to change so that you can allow service providers to run commercial deployments of TV white space. Then you'll have the equipment manufacturers come in and provide more investment and drop that price on the hardware. So, but until you, but somebody has to move first. Otherwise, you're not going to see that ecosystem really develop as quickly as some of these others. So, from our perspective, in terms of investments in ISPs or small and local carriers, local service providers, it's a standard ratios that apply, but there are dynamics within the sector that really are reducing the cost of CapEx for these entities.
Thanks very much, John. So yes, I'll invite questions from the audience now. Yes, the representative from the Maldives, and then Christopher. So, Maldives, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Could I ask maybe everyone to, I know you've done this throughout the week, but maybe identify yourself and where you're from as well to help the panel.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Let me introduce myself. I'm Sharif from the Maldives. All right. Thank you, panelists, for some very interesting conversations. I think, as you rightly pointed out, the last mile connecting the last few billion is really important. And in the Maldives, the burning question right now is that of municipal networks or networks based on the open access network kind kind of concept versus those of operator-owned networks. Now, let me give you a little bit of context to this question, although I know every country is different, and I would like to hear not only from the panelists, but from the other countries' experience as we try to decide on our way forward. In the Maldives, we do have very tiny islands with a handful of households. 2 slightly larger islands we call cities, 3 or 4 cities maybe with 10,000 population plus. All right, but most of the time we have populations of less than 300, or maybe residential populations below 300 for many of the cases. For these cases, in the past, in the early 2000s, the tool that we used was the tool of policy. Our communications policy at the time obligated the service providers to what we call the universal connectivity obligation to have 1 telephone in every island. And thus, we had 100% coverage very quickly, very early on, with a telephone booth in every island. And this was a major milestone because very soon queues started forming in front of this, and then we could see the elasticity in the market and the need, and then very quickly following on that, 2G, 3G, we have 100% coverage. But when it comes to these small islands, what I note is the earliest real community kind of led initiatives for their own community networks was in the area of television. Cable TV was the first guys to actually set up local networks. And now the ISPs are actually partnering with these guys to provide internet services through this sort of cable. So it started with wireless cable TVs, and now we have coax, and now in some islands going into fiber. And these are very much smaller companies, but again, they are not really community owned. They are this small SME space where you have kind of not ISPs, right? But it's a very interesting idea. But what is emerging now is with the emergence of the bigger players understanding that there is real a real appetite for data, even when there are few people in the Maldives case. Really there is an appetite to go to the islands. But what happens is when everyone wants to invest in their own infrastructure in these small islands, ultimately the citizens bear the cost. So the affordability in Maldives is the #1 challenge. Not as much as the excess, but as much as can they really afford it in the islands, right? And for those reasons, this question comes to the forefront now. Should we have like one network which should be open access and shared, and then should we ask, right, everyone has to write this? But then on the other side, people say, now you are creating a monopoly of a carrier here, and that may also have negative consequences. So I would like to hear from the panel and from the rest of the participants.
Thank you very much. So panel, who would like to grapple with that question? Should they have one open access in the Maldives or another option?
That's my interest. So in a small island with small population, so I think it's still good to have some competitors, because if there is this monopoly of just one operators, there will not be good in terms of the affordability you're talking about. So at least it is good to have some competitors, not just have this one operators there. That's my suggestions.
John, Garrity, yes.
Sure. Just to follow up on that, and I of course will defer to, I see a number of experts in the room here who have worked on open access policy, particularly for core network infrastructure and middle mile networks. But just to say from previous experiences, so for example, when I was at USAID and we would fund middle mile infrastructure in sub-Saharan Africa, I mean, there were certain principles that we would follow. For example, if there was going to be any public investment in the middle mile infrastructure, then yes, then we would require an open access policy at market rates onto the entities, or you know, there are cases where when you have, yes, a very dominant provider and you don't want to duplicate a lot of that investment, then there would be open access issues, open access policy that would be put into place. So I think there are a lot of examples that I think other folks in the room would be able to point to help in the Maldives case.
Thank you. Rohan, did you want to comment on this, or? Because I do.
Well, maybe you could consider it a new point. You want to follow up, continue on this line?
Yes, I'm happy to take a couple of comments, but I do recognize Christopher has a different question, I assume, Christopher. Yeah. So let's just a few minutes on this discussion, if that's okay. Go ahead.
Using a comment from John Garrity, where he talked about the unit costs and how these things change, a lot of non-commercial initiatives begin with, I mean, at a certain point, when you're planning, you look at the unit costs of deployment, and you look at the unit costs of deployment of the commercial entity, the licensed operator. And there's a gap, and the non-commercial or the local or the small network is viable. But as you were pointing out, these numbers change all the time. What was uneconomical in year X is economical in year X plus 2. So what then happens is that the big guys move in, and the previous innovative, inclusive activity becomes pushed out. This is not limited to telecom only. I've seen it happen in electricity, where the grid comes out and then the non-grid solutions go out, actually creating financial difficulties for people who invested in them. How do we deal with this issue in a dynamic environment? The interaction between the commercial and the non-commercial, so to speak.
I know that was phrased as a question, but I do also want to bring in, and again, if I should have said to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I am Suresh Kumar from India, Ministry of Railways, Railtel Corporation of India Limited. I just want to add a similar solution. I want to give a Maldives problem. We are into Railtel. We are laying optical fiber along the railway tracks, and we have created a backbone network along railway tracks with DWDM, SDH, and MPLS network. So we also had the idea that how we should go into the retail market in the smaller areas. So we went into a joint partnership model with local cable TV operators. The cable TV operators, they have strength in managing the local cable network. They have strength in managing the local people. They have strength in the collection of money in the retail market. We had the internet backbone. So in partnership with the local cable TV operators in many cities, many smaller towns, we have arrangement of 50% revenue sharing. So we provide internet bandwidth. So either they come to our railway station and connect their cable network, or vice versa, we go up to their village and connect our internet bandwidth. Then we provide a modem where cable TV signal and internet bandwidth both are carried out, and the services are delivered to local cable developers. So in Maldives, they can just try where some government entity can enter into every island and provide their fiber network with internet bandwidth. Then later on, all the local cable TV operators, they can join there and share the revenues. That can be one of the suggestions to Mr. Maldives problem.
Give the panel the opportunity to respond on them, either Rohan or comments. Anyone? If not, I'll invite Christopher and then the gentleman from Japan. No, it was Christopher first and then you.
I'll respond to it.
Oh, sorry, Christopher, pause. Just for John.
I'll respond to Rohan's because I know Christopher's question is going to be very difficult, so I'll use my time here. Which this is a difficult question too, but I think it's a really good one, and I think it's something that we've struggled with. again, in previous roles, when we've been trying to encourage more investment in last mile connectivity initiatives, this issue comes up, right? I mean, first of all, there's an issue of really knowing where there is a lack of connectivity infrastructure in areas. And so that goes back to some of the discussion that others have had around better network access information, network access mapping, open telecom data issues. Frankly, it's not clear. It's difficult when you don't know where the network actually extends to then be able to invest in some of these areas. But that's a different matter from this question that Rohan has posed, which is the risk appetite, right? So there's different risk appetite thresholds for private investors, for public sector investors, and public subsidy. And frankly, I think even if you have the same level of, let's say, risk with a telco coming into an area and essentially pushing out or undercutting some smaller community network or initiative that's trying to connect this community, I think the private sector investors will be more reticent to participate versus potentially public sector and public subsidy, because in the end, the public policy objective of reducing the cost of access to that community will be met, even though it may be a private sector entity moving in there. So it's not a great answer, but I think one of the ways to think about it, at least from a public sector perspective, is that yes, if you do provide public subsidy to connect a community, and in 2 or 3 years, if a private entity does come in, then at least the public policy objective is still served, even if there may be not as much cost recovery on the initial investment.
I do recognise other people willing to comment, but I will allow Christopher. Go ahead, please, and introduce yourself for those of us who don't know you.
Of course. My name is Christopher Yu. I teach at the University of Pennsylvania in the United States, where we're leading a project called One World Connected. Just on this one issue, before I actually raise the issue I was going to talk about, there is one caution about open access models, which is most of the policy models were developed for open access to private carriers for legacy infrastructures that have already been built out, and not ones that required new investments. Looking at the literature on open access, there's a lot of support for it under those circumstances through unbundling and the other techniques we know of. That doesn't port over to publicly funded greenfield new capital investment problems. And if it's a private investment, if you have an open access regime, that means any upside will be dissipated, and all of the downside will be borne by whoever invested the capital. And so you have a growing empirical literature that says on the private side that has a deterrence on investment, because if there's a moral hazard problem, everyone else can wait and see if it pays out. If it works, you jump in. If it doesn't work, you let whoever built it eat all the losses. And that just, we understand how that all works. I'm delighted to have the chance to talk here and to thank the wonderful panelists for their presentations. I in particular appreciate Nepal Wireless and Vanuatu, because they've been partners with us in our research studies. Nepal Wireless was one of our very first case studies, and what they are doing wiring in Nepal, if you don't know about it, the number of 200 plus communities they've been able to connect is simply astounding. And Vanuatu, through what Deputy CIO Jack is talking about through the Vital Network, is simply amazing. It's an example of an atypical build. It's not end user based, it's anchor point institution based, where they're using their initial connectivity to connect remote clinics for remote diagnosis, because it takes about 2 days to get to a hospital. So the big question is, when is that worth undertaking? And second, the hospitals on the other islands treat different specialties. So to know which hospital you should be going to, we've actually demonstrated that we believe that it's actually saved approximately 60 lives within a very short amount of time, about 18 months. And there's some different aspects about mobilizing communities for crowdsourcing support for people to undertake the trip. So it's been a fascinating development. I have two questions. One, I think that John Garrity brings out the excellent point that much to the surprise of people in the telecom space, the problem is not capital expenditure, it's operating expenditure. And that's coming out very dominantly in all the studies we're doing. The biggest problem is backhaul. And I would love to hear from both the panelists and from other people who are building community networks in the room how they're solving this, because that's where a little information of sharing would be tremendously helpful to the entire community. The second point I would make is that all the panelists talked about sustainability and generating revenue, as the Thai example and the others do. What is quite striking is almost all the Asia community networks have scaled successfully and had revenue models. The vast majority of community networks in the other parts of the world don't, which means they're surviving on grant funding, and they will almost certainly collapse when the funding stops because they have no sustainable means. And I'm very curious why Asia has been so much more successful in thinking about sustainability and making sure that community networks have enduring success than other parts of the world. Because if you look at it, I think 80–90% of the other community networks around the world have no revenue whatsoever and are struggling to make a transition from a free service to a revenue-based service. And they're obviously trying to keep it affordable, but there has to be some sustainability. And so I'm curious if anyone has any insights into what is unique about the Asia region that has made it more successful in generating sustainable community networking projects.
I can see people interested in your question in the audience, but let me invite the panel. Mahabir, you're reaching for the microphone.
Yep. So regarding your question about this, backhaul problem, solving the backhaul problem for, building the community network, that's the main issues, because building community network, we need to get connected somewhere else. We need to get connected to the internet, and the building, the backhaul is the main cost. It's the most expensive part of the program. So we faced that. Nepal wireless faced that, and because we have been building wireless network more than 200 villages and far from this from the cities. It takes like several days, not only 1 or 2 days or 3 days, like 7, 8, 9, 10 days of walking to get to those villages, because there are no roads and nothing. So building backhaul is the main problem. So in order to solve that problem, I suggested the government of Nepal to help build the backhaul using the universal service obligation funds. The government did not listen that for many years, but in the last few years, I know they have started, after the earthquake actually, they have started building the backhaul to connect, especially at least to the local government, to the office of the local government. We have a federal system in Nepal, and we have around 740 local governments all over the countries, and the local governments wants to get connected to the internet and use the internet for providing services to the people. So in our case, the government is using the Universal Service Obligation Fund to build the backhaul, because for this commercial operator, it is not possible to invest that much money to build the backhaul, because by investing that much money, they are not going to get much return in short time. So that's what they are doing. So what they are doing is using that money, they are helping to build using optical fiber to places where it is possible. Where it is not possible to build the optical fiber, they are building the wireless network, at least to connect the office of the local governments and the schools and the clinics. So that's something they are doing. So I think that is very important, and somebody has to spend money to build the backhaul, and it should be the government that they should do that. They should help to do that.
Just on the backhaul question, Professor Kanchana.
As for Thailand, as I mentioned earlier, we have better situation where it happened that the last 5 years, the government started to address this backhaul problem, and they started to build this Pacharat network. However, I think that backhaul frame that the government has built, they also have sustainable problem, because they don't have a plan to how to maintain the network, which is very expensive, and I'm not sure if that network will survive after government changes in the future. However, for this kind of expansion has created demands and all kind of positive impact on the expansion from the private sector. So I tend to believe in competition and the expansion from the private sector, and I believe that it will sustain. And our network try to use so far we have not connect our network to the Pacharat network, because there are so many rules and regulations. So we always connect our network to private operator. So I believe that if you have a good competition, and the backhaul network should expand.
Thank you very much. Maybe I can invite members of the audience to respond to Christopher's second question. Can anyone care to explain why community networks in Asia are more profitable or sustainable than the rest of the world? Yes, sir.
Right, my name is Hyunjun Kim. I'm working for the United Nations Project Office on Governance with a Korean government employee background this last year. In relation to the questions about the revenue approach, how the community network contribute to the the network in their community, so we can say two things. One is the community network does not only the geographical community. Sometimes the professional community is also the community, right? For example, like a Buddhist monks community. So in Korean case, we call it the information villages. So those in the information village was the made by the Korean government initiatives. Actually, it's not the self-made community networks. So the last it's actually the last mile, but the Korean the local government provide some subsidies for maintain those infrastructure. After then, there's quite a number of proposals to why the information village can be made. One is connection or communication with the rest of the family who left their hometown. And the other one is some provide the arena for the local product transaction. So each the villages or community in geographical community produce some their own local product, so they can make the market, online market, and open to the society in a national level, so they can to make some transaction through the online and then get some revenue from them. Or sometimes they advertising some events related on the tour. Or sometimes they provide accommodation like Airbnb. It's an old model of Airbnb. So sometimes they provide homestaying. So community itself make or generate their own entrepreneur related to their own hometown. So that contribute to the increasing the revenue of the community itself.
Yeah, I know the gentleman's been waiting very patiently. Osman, I see you, but I'd like to invite, yes, please. please, your question, and we can come back to this subject and other comments. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Izumi Aizu. I work for the Institute for Infosocionomics in Japan. I used to work for the community networks in the 80s, before the internet. And then they tried to promote internet in the 90s, used to live in Malaysia. Actually, a few days ago, I was in Kathmandu spending a day with Mahabir, my very good friend, and he was not talking too much about wireless networking at all, but National Innovation Center. So I have this question. Seemingly, we take it granted that pipes or the information superhighways are sort of giving something good. Is it really true? Or should we start there or elsewhere? Because for some middle and upper income societies, villages, the pipes might be, the competition is fine, and we want to choose one or the other. To do what? The community building or entertainment? Phones or games or SNSs, are they really necessary for the poor village people that we are talking about? So I think we may better perhaps make some distinction about what exactly these community networks or broadband or pipes will deliver to the people they need. Because I feel throughout this week I was here for the other summit talks, too much emphasis might be seemingly put on the pipes. I'm getting a little fed up with that, sorry about that. I used to be very much trying to promote broadband in Japan and so on and so forth. So is it a real good starting point? Or if you build it, would they really come? What do they come? Would they come? Because when I was in the Nepal's villages after the earthquake, we did some study about what exactly they delivered. What we found with small 2 villages comparative study was the more local information they needed to save their lives or get some food or water, it was not online on the internet. You get a lot of information online from the international rescue services, government efforts and stuff, a little bit far from their daily lives to save or improve. So what we need, perhaps we need both approaches. I don't deny the fact that we sometimes want to have the entertainment, but that is not enough, perhaps. And most of the revenues from big ISPs come from these entertainments, not the basic needs, perhaps. Of course, it depends on the local community on differences, but what we really want to focus on is the solutions or resources to change these lives or situations. That was my question and comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John, please.
Just maybe a quick comment, and thank you, Professor, for that. I think a lot of people share your concerns, and if you follow some of the discussion that I think was even here this week, but also a lot of the reports that have been coming out, for example, from the Pathways for Progress Commission out of the UK. Somebody mentioned earlier that the Alliance for Affordable Internet is also doing this, but people are actually really trying to elevate this a notion of what is meaningful connectivity, right? What is meaningful universal access? And so there's a lot more focus on making sure that what we're creating in terms of a digital economy is also something that is really providing agency to users to participate, to be producers, not just consumers. And so there's a lot of work there, a lot of digital literacy, a lot of focus on privacy issues. But that being said, I mean, I think it's also important that and this is an issue that we have in international development, that we don't necessarily play a paternalistic role to say what people should be doing on the internet, as long as it's legal. I mean, of course, we have to draw boundaries there. But if it is really entertainment and the ability to communicate with relatives that have brought people online, and really, let's be honest, that's one of the reasons why people have really gravitated toward participating online. This is the reason why the mobile miracle was so extensive in sub-Saharan Africa and across Asia. We shouldn't necessarily be paternalistic and say, you know what, these are things we don't want you to do. We want you to focus on improving your income, on doing telemedicine. Those things are great, but really, there was great work, and there was an article in The Economist about a month ago that showed a lot of the data that really people are spending time on the internet in time pass activities, right? They're going on the internet first to communicate and to be entertained, and then moving up the sort of ladder, if you want to call it, to participate in productive uses. So yes, we need to focus on what do we mean by meaningful access and meaningful connectivity, but we also, I think, have to be careful not to be prescriptive on what people should only be allowed to do online.
I indicated, Chris, go ahead, and then Mahabir next, but yes.
So I take the question seriously, that there is, to me, demonstrated we have to make the case for how this is going to work. And I take this also from the question from the representative from Iran yesterday about what does it really mean? How do we operationalize this in concrete terms? What I find, so the missing link here is a proof that even if you're convinced there are benefits of internet connectivity, should we invest it in healthcare? Should we invest it in education? Should we invest it in digital literacy? What are the keys and what is the efficient turnover for dollars of investment of limited resources? What I do find is I think that to overcome skeptical audiences, we have to demonstrate it, but even if there's convinced audiences, we have to demonstrate it. So I'll give you some concrete examples. We have a lot of anecdotal things about how it improves education and healthcare. We're doing a pilot in a rural area with mHealth connectivity for one disease, which is diabetes. And it estimates that on a per hospital annual basis, it's saving them a minimum of $300,000 a year. And what we need to find out is how robust that number is and how it can be expanded. But all of a sudden then you have hospital administrators, telecom companies, other providers, and health ministers deeply engaged in this process, and they can ask the question, is it better off using it for this or something about heart failure or other health issues, and we can start to calibrate it. But simply saying it helps health is no longer enough. And it'll help education. We don't know if that means lower school education, middle school education. Is it about, one of the things we're studying, digital literacy? Is it about entrepreneurship? Is it about basic technical skills? Is it best provided over apps or in person, over how long it has to be? And these are all things we're testing to get real numbers on. I can't say that there will be scientifically great, but when you're starting with nothing, anything that is in the ballpark is helpful. And our hope is to create, I think the community has reached a stage where we need a real evidence base for decision makers who are facing many demands on limited resources to really understand how to use them in a way that benefits citizens the most. And I think that the conversation we're starting to have here is an important part of that.
Thank you. I'm getting a signal that we're coming to the end, so I'll allow Mahabir to have a final comment on this.
Okay, regarding this, the sustainability of the community network and the questions Christopher asked why the community networks in Asian countries are doing well. I cannot tell about other countries, but in our case, I say that our community networks are surviving and is being sustainable because they don't have any choice. Because mostly the area where we build community network is in remote areas and there are no other services available, so no operators available. They have to make it, sustainable. So the communities are working very hard to make it sustain. But another issue is how to make this sustainable is, other than the no choice, the services has to be beneficial for the people. If the services, if the community network can bring, services that is good for the communities or the communities need, then it will survive. If the services is not useful, then no matter how strong network you build, infrastructure you build to bring the internet, how much bandwidth internet, fast broadband internet you bring, the network is not going to survive. So to do that, so what we are doing in Nepal is we are trying to bring services that is useful for people, such as telemedicine or health programs and education programs and digital literacy programs and so several other programs that the community needs. So we need to ask the communities what they need. Then we need to try to bring that services for them, not that we should tell them that you need this services, and we brought the services and use these services. If we tell that like that, it's not going to work. So we need to develop programs based on the need of the communities. That's what we are trying to do through the Innovation Center. What we are trying to do with the Innovation Center is we are asking the local governments to let us know what they need in their communities. So based upon their, the problems, or based upon their requests, so we try to develop, services that is beneficial for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and my apologies to those of you who still had questions and comments, but thank you all for your participation. Thank you to the panel, and I'll hand back to the Master of Ceremonies.
Thank you, everyone. So before we take a short break, we would like to, at the end of each session, we would like everyone to participate in a survey, and then we can see, everyone can see the running tally of the survey. So the first question is, community networks, are they a workable last mile complementary access solution to connect the unconnected? So we will have a 10-minute break. If we would like to request everyone to come back for after the break, maybe around 11:50, so that we can begin the next session on time. So thank you again, and we'll see you later.